Okay, so have you ever noticed that, like, when you have to give a presentation or just talk about something specific, uh, you can just get stuck. Like, you just don't know where to begin.
Oh, yeah, totally. I know what you mean.
Yeah, it's almost like having too many ideas.
Right, like too many possibilities.
Yeah, exactly. And, you and I, we love to explore all kinds of different topics and learn new things. But even for us, I think we can both relate to that feeling of like, hmm, where do I even start?
Absolutely. And that's what we're going to dive into today, those initial steps for choosing a speech topic and figuring out what you want to achieve with it.
Exactly. It's like laying the foundation for any kind of effective communication, whether it's a formal speech or even just a casual conversation.
And the material we have for this deep dive is really insightful. It provides a sort of framework for going from this huge universe of potential topics down to one specific idea, you know?
Like a roadmap.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, even though this might seem kind of basic, it's actually really crucial for avoiding that feeling of being overwhelmed by information, which I know is something you're always trying to avoid.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, who isn't, right?
True.
So let's jump right in. One thing that our sources point out is that in a lot of situations, the topic kind of chooses itself.
Yeah.
Like if you're a politician, you're probably going to talk about politics.
Right. It's driven by the context.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So like a tech CEO is going to talk about technology at a conference, or a historian might give a lecture about a historical event. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, their expertise and the occasion naturally lead them to certain topics.
But then you have situations like a speech class where you have way more freedom,
Hmm.
and that's where things can get a little trickier.
Yeah. It's like suddenly you have this huge menu of options and you're not sure what to order.
Exactly. And the material actually breaks down potential speech topics into three main categories, which I thought was really helpful. The first category is all about drawing on what you already know, leveraging your personal experiences and knowledge.
Right. Tapping into your own expertise.
And there's some really great examples in the text, like a student from Turkey talking about their daily life.
Yeah, that's a unique perspective that only they can offer.
Exactly. Or someone who works at a jewelry store and knows all about how to judge the quality of diamonds, or a student who lived through a tornado and can share their firsthand account.
Powerful stuff.
Yeah. And there are even examples like, someone who's been a housewife for years and then goes back to school and can talk about the challenges and adjustments they had to make.
I love that example because it shows that everyday experiences can be really valuable and insightful for others.
Totally. And the text also mentions things like turning your hobby into a business, or giving a behind-the-scenes look at a place like Disney World, or teaching people basic sign language, or explaining the rules of rugby. It really highlights the fact that everyone has something unique to offer.
Absolutely. And then the second category is about choosing a topic that you're curious about, something you want to learn more about.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
turns the speech into a learning opportunity for both you and the audience.
I like that.
So one example is a student who's fascinated by Stonehenge but doesn't really know much about it. She uses the speech as a chance to do some research and share her findings with the class.
That's cool. And speaking of research, there's also an example about neuromarketing, which is something I know you're interested in.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I'm always fascinated by how our brains work and how that influences our decisions.
Well, apparently big companies are using these brain science techniques to try and get people to buy their products, which is kind of mind-blowing.
It's definitely a field that's rapidly evolving and having major implications for marketing and advertising.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
that student who gave the speech about neuromarketing, they saw it as a chance to learn more about this cutting-edge topic and share that knowledge with their classmates.
And the audience probably got a lot out of it, too, because it's something that's relevant to their lives. They're constantly being bombarded with advertising.
Absolutely. So the second category is all about turning your curiosity into a speech topic. And the third category focuses on issues that you feel strongly about, your opinions and beliefs.
Right, like things that you're passionate about.
So our sources mention things like school safety and the environment, which are obviously important issues that a lot of people care about.
And it's not just limited to these global concerns. It can also be local issues, like a proposal to build a new community center or concerns about safety on campus. Exactly.
It's about using your voice to advocate for what you believe in. And these don't always have to be super serious or controversial topics. It could be something like, arguing for a change in the school dress code, or advocating for more vegetarian options in the cafeteria.
It's about anything that you feel strongly enough about to want to share with others and try to persuade them to see your point of view.
Right. So we have these three categories: personal knowledge, curiosity, and strong opinions and beliefs. But what if you're still feeling stuck? What if you can't think of any topics that fit into these
Well,
categories?
that's where brainstorming comes in.
Brainstorming.
Yeah, it's a way to generate ideas and get your creative juices flowing.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So the first technique is called a personal inventory. And it's as simple as it sounds. Just grab a piece of paper or open a document and start listing everything that comes to mind. You know?
Like what?
Your experiences, your interests, your hobbies, your skills, your values, your beliefs, anything and everything that makes you you.
Hmm. Okay. I can see how that could be helpful, just getting everything out of your head and onto paper.
Right, and sometimes just seeing it all written down can spark an idea, or you might notice connections between things that you hadn't thought of before.
Okay, and what's the second brainstorming technique?
It's called clustering.
Clustering.
So this one involves dividing a page into 9 categories: people, places, things, events, processes, concepts, natural phenomena, problems and plans, and policies.
Wow, 9 categories. That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a way to ensure that you're considering a wide range of possibilities. So you basically just write down any initial thoughts or ideas that come to mind under each category.
Okay, I think I'm getting it. So, like, under people, I might write down famous historical figures or people I admire, or even fictional characters.
Exactly. And then under places, you could list countries you've traveled to, or dream destinations, or even just different rooms in your house.
Hmm, interesting. So it's about expanding your thinking and considering all these different angles.
Right. And then within each cluster, you can use a technique called free association, where you pick one word and just start writing down any other words that pop into your head.
Oh, I like that, kind of like a word game.
Exactly. And the text gives a great example of how this can lead to unexpected and interesting topics. So a student started with the word movies, and through free association, they ended up with gambling addiction as a potential speech topic.
Wow, how did they get from movies to gambling addiction?
Well, they went from movies to Academy Awards to prizes to lotteries to gambling to addiction.
Ah, I see. So it's about letting your mind wander and see where it takes you.
Precisely. You never know what kind of interesting connections you might make.
That's really cool. And if the personal inventory and clustering don't work, our sources also suggest turning to the internet.
Of course, the internet, a treasure trove of information.
Exactly. They recommend browsing subject-specific websites, online encyclopedias, and reference portals just to see what catches your eye.
And one student had a really creative approach. She decided to use an online dictionary and limit herself to words starting with the letter S.
Starting with S, why S?
No particular reason, just a random constraint to help her narrow down the possibilities. And you know what? She came up with a ton of interesting potential topics.
Like what?
Sleepwalking space exploration, the stock market Stonehenge, and even the history of the saxophone.
Wow, that's amazing. What a great way to get your creative juices flowing.
Right. It just goes to show that sometimes limitations can actually be beneficial.
Absolutely. So we've covered a lot of ground in terms of choosing a topic, but one thing that our sources really emphasize is the importance of starting early.
Yes, time is your friend when it comes to speech preparation.
Definitely don't wait until the last minute to choose your topic and start researching, because that's just going to lead to stress and a rushed speech.
Starting early gives you the opportunity to explore different ideas, brainstorm, refine your topic, and do thorough research so you can feel confident and prepared when it's time to deliver your speech.
Great advice. So let's say you've chosen your topic. What's the next step?
Well, the next step is to determine the general purpose of your speech.
The general purpose.
Yes, it's essentially the overall goal of your speech. What do you want to achieve?
Okay, I think I understand. So if I'm giving a speech about the benefits of yoga, my general purpose might be to inform my audience about yoga.
Exactly. And there are 2 main general purposes: to inform and to persuade.
Inform and persuade. Got it.
To inform is all about sharing knowledge and increasing the audience's understanding of a particular topic. So in your yoga example, you'd be aiming to teach your audience about the history of yoga, the different types of yoga, the benefits of yoga, and so on.
Okay, that makes sense. And what about persuade?
To persuade is about convincing the audience to agree with your point of view or to take a specific action.
So if I was giving a persuasive speech about yoga, I might try to convince my audience to start practicing yoga.
Exactly. You'd be presenting arguments and evidence to support your claim that yoga is beneficial and encourage your audience to give it a try.
Okay, so inform is about teaching, and persuade is about convincing.
Precisely. And while these 2 general purposes are distinct, they can sometimes overlap.
How so?
Well, let's say you're giving a speech about climate change. You might start by informing your audience about the science of climate change, the causes and the effects.
Right.
But then you might shift to a persuasive approach by arguing that we need to take action to address climate change.
Ah, I see. So you can start by informing and then build towards persuasion.
Exactly. And sometimes the general purpose will be obvious, like if you're assigned to give an informative speech.
Right.
But in other situations, you might need to figure it out for yourself.
Okay, so how do you determine the general purpose if it's not explicitly stated?
Well, one way is to ask yourself, what is the main thing I want my audience to take away from this speech? Do I want them to learn something new, or do I want them to change their beliefs or behavior?
That's a good question to ask. And once you've determined your general purpose, what's next?
Then you need to narrow it down further and formulate your specific purpose.
Specific purpose.
Okay. Yes. This is a single infinitive phrase that states precisely what you hope to accomplish with your speech. It should be focused and clear.
So instead of just saying, I want to inform my audience about yoga, I would need to be more specific.
Exactly. You might say to inform my audience about the 3 main benefits of practicing yoga regularly.
Okay, I see. That's much more specific and actionable.
And the text provides a really helpful example of how to refine your specific purpose. It talks about a student named Dwayne Winfield who gave a speech on music therapy.
Music therapy, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, it is. So Dwayne started with a broad topic, music therapy, and a general purpose to inform.
Okay.
But then he had to figure out what specific aspect of music therapy he wanted to focus on.
Right, because music therapy is a pretty broad topic.
Exactly. He considered different angles, like the different types of facilities that use music therapy, the role of the music therapist, the evidence supporting the benefits of music therapy, and the needs of different patient populations.
Wow, that's a lot to consider.
It is, and he eventually settled on the specific purpose to inform my audience about the benefits of music therapy for people with psychological or cognitive disabilities.
Okay, so he went from a general topic to a very specific focus.
Exactly, and that focus allowed him to deliver a well-researched and impactful speech.
And another important point that our sources emphasize is the need to include the audience in your specific purpose statement.
Absolutely. It's not enough to just say, to inform my audience about the benefits of music therapy, you need to specify who your audience is.
Right, because the way you would explain music therapy to a group of musicians would be different from how you would explain it to a group of medical students or to a group of social workers.
Precisely, the audience should always be at the forefront of your mind when you're preparing your speech.
And the text gives a great real-world example of how this plays out in a professional setting. It talks about a mayor who's launching a new youth center initiative.
Oh, yeah, I remember that example.
So the mayor's general purpose is to inform the public about the new youth center. But his specific purpose is much more targeted to inform the news briefing audience about the 4 key benefits of the new youth center.
Exactly. He's tailoring his message to the specific audience he's addressing.
And then his central idea, which is the main message he wants to convey, is the new youth center will provide activities, social networks, extended hours, and free access for all city youths.
And his main points would likely elaborate on each of those 4 benefits activities: social networks, extended hours, and free access.
It's a perfect example of how the general purpose, specific purpose, central idea, and main points all work together to create a cohesive and effective message.
And it highlights why it's so important to be mindful of your audience throughout the speech preparation process.
Absolutely. So let's talk about some practical tips for formulating a strong, specific purpose statement.
Okay, sounds good.
The first tip is to write it as a full infinitive phrase, not just a single word or a fragment.
Right. So instead of just saying avalanches, you would say to inform my audience about the 3 major kinds of avalanches.
Exactly. The infinitive phrase makes it clear that this is a statement of your intent.
The second tip is to express your specific purpose as a statement, not a question.
Okay, so instead of saying, what is Dia de los Muertos?
You would say to inform my audience about the history of Mexico's Dia de los Muertos celebration.
Right. The statement format is more direct and focused.
The third tip is to avoid figurative language.
So no metaphors or similes?
Right, because while figurative language can be very effective in the body of your speech, your specific purpose statement needs to be clear and unambiguous.
Okay, so instead of saying to persuade my audience that the campus policy on student parking really stinks.
You would say to persuade my audience that the campus policy on student parking should be revised to provide more affordable options for students.
I see, that's much more specific and actionable.
The fourth tip is to limit your specific purpose to one distinct idea.
Okay, so don't try to cram too much into one speech.
Right, so instead of saying to persuade my audience to become literacy tutors and to donate time to Meals on Wheels.
Which are both great causes, by the way.
Yes, they are, but they're 2 separate ideas.
So you would need to choose one or the other.
Exactly. You could either say to persuade my audience to become literacy tutors or to persuade my audience to donate time to Meals on Wheels.
Got it. And the fifth and final tip is to make sure your specific purpose is not too vague or general,
Right. So instead of saying to persuade my audience that something should be done about gerrymandering,
which is a very complex issue.
it is you would need to be more specific, you might say, to persuade my audience that each state should create a nonpartisan commission to draw fair and impartial electoral districts.
Okay, so it's all about being as specific and focused as possible.
Exactly. Your specific purpose statement is like a blueprint for your speech. It should guide your research, your organization, and your delivery.
And in addition to these 5 tips, our sources also provide a list of questions to ask about your specific purpose.
Yes, these questions are really helpful for ensuring that your specific purpose is appropriate and achievable.
So the first question is, does my purpose meet the assignment?
Always a good place to start. Make sure you're fulfilling the requirements.
The second question is, can I accomplish my purpose in the time allotted?
This is so important. Remember that you have a limited amount of time to deliver your speech.
And the text actually gives some helpful guidelines for how much you can realistically cover in a 6-minute speech.
Right. They mentioned that the average speaking rate is about 120 to 150 words per minute. So a 6-minute speech would be around 720 to 900 words.
So you wouldn't want to choose a topic that's too broad or complex for the allotted time.
Like the rise and fall of the Roman Empire.
Or the role of technology in human history, or converting to Buddhism.
All fascinating topics, but definitely too much for a 6-minute speech.
The third question is the purpose relevant to my audience?
You always want to make sure that your speech is engaging and meaningful for your listeners.
So you wouldn't give a speech about the best retirement communities in Palm Springs to a group of college students.
Probably not, unless you could find a way to tie it back to their interests or experiences.
Right, maybe you could talk about the challenges of aging or the importance of planning for the future.
Exactly. Finding that connection is key.
The fourth question is the purpose too trivial for my audience?
You don't want your audience to feel like you're wasting their time.
So you wouldn't give a speech about how to tie a square knot.
Probably not, unless you were addressing a group of young children or people who had never tied a knot before.
Or maybe if you were a professional sailor and you could share some advanced knot tying techniques.
True, there are always exceptions, but in general, you want to choose a topic that's going to be stimulating and informative for your audience.
The fifth question is the purpose too technical for my audience?
You don't want to lose your audience with jargon or overly complex concepts.
So you wouldn't give a speech about international finance or clinical psychology to a general audience.
Not without simplifying it considerably.
Right, and the text actually gives some examples of topics that are probably too technical for most audiences, like Fermat's last theorem, neutrino physics, and elliptic curve cryptography.
Those are definitely topics that require specialized knowledge.
And if you're not sure whether your topic is appropriate for your audience, the text suggests doing some audience analysis.
Yes, audience analysis is a crucial part of speech preparation, and we'll be diving into that topic in more detail in a future deep dive.
Excellent. So once you've formulated a clear and focused specific purpose statement, what's the next step?
The next step is to develop your central idea.
The central idea.
Yes, this is a concise one-sentence statement that encapsulates the main message of your speech.
Okay, so it's like the thesis statement of your speech.
Exactly. It's the key takeaway that you want your audience to remember.
And how do you come up with your central idea?
Well, one way is to think about what you would say if you had to sum up your entire speech in just one sentence.
That's a good exercise.
So let's say you're giving a speech about the problems with the prison system.
Okay.
You might start by brainstorming a list of problems like overcrowding, lack of rehabilitation programs, and racial bias. And then you could condense that list into a single sentence like, the prison system is plagued by overcrowding, a lack of effective rehabilitation programs, and systemic racial bias.
That's a powerful central idea.
And it clearly lays out the main points that you'll be discussing in your speech.
Exactly. So the central idea acts as both a summary and a preview of your speech.
Precisely. And it's also often referred to as the residual message.
The residual message.
Yes. It's the message that you want to stick with your audience long after they've heard your speech.
Okay, that makes sense. And the text gives another great example about music therapy.
Oh, yeah, Dwayne Winfield.
Yeah, so Dwayne's specific purpose was to inform his audience about the benefits of music therapy for people with psychological or cognitive disabilities.
Right.
And his central idea was music therapy can be an effective treatment for a variety of psychological and cognitive disabilities, improving patients' communication skills, emotional regulation, and overall quality of life.
Exactly. So his central idea highlights the main points that he'll be discussing in his speech: the benefits of music therapy for communication skills, emotional regulation, and quality of life.
I see. And the text also mentions that the central idea often emerges after you've done some research and started to organize your thoughts.
Right. It's kind of like a puzzle piece that falls into place once you've gathered all the other pieces.
And they give an example about a student named James Curry who gave a speech about the pilot shortage.
Oh, I remember that one.
So James started with a topic and a specific purpose, but he didn't formulate his central idea until after he had done some research and identified the main causes of the pilot shortage.
And what were the main causes?
Well, according to his research, it was a combination of factors including changes in FAA certification requirements, an increase in pilot retirements, and growing demand for air travel, both domestically and internationally.
So his central idea was,
Changes in certification requirements, an increase in retirements, and ever-growing demand for air travel are creating a serious shortage of pilots in the United States and around the world.
wow, that's a very clear and concise statement of the problem.
It is, and it sets the stage for the rest of his speech.
Absolutely. So the central idea is a crucial element of any effective speech.
It is, and just like with the specific purpose statement, there are some guidelines for crafting a strong central idea.
Right. It should be expressed in a full sentence.
Not a phrase or a question.
Correct. And it should not be in the form of a question.
Okay.
It should also avoid figurative language.
So no metaphors or similes.
Right. Keep it clear and straightforward.
And it should not be vague or overly general.
Exactly. It needs to be specific and focused.
The text gives some examples of poorly written central ideas and shows how to improve them.
Yeah, like studying abroad is great. It's too general.
Right. A better version would be studying abroad can enhance your education, broaden your horizons, and increase your career prospects.
Exactly. That's much more specific and informative.
And then there's benefits of parkour, which isn't even a full sentence.
Right. A better version would be parkour is a challenging and rewarding activity that can improve your fitness, agility, and problem-solving skills.
And then there's what are nanorobots, which is a question, not a statement.
Right. A better version would be nanorobots are microscopic machines with the potential to revolutionize medicine manufacturing and environmental cleanup.
And finally, Costa Rica is awesome, is too subjective, and uses figurative language.
Right. A better version would be Costa Rica is a beautiful and biodiverse country with a rich culture-friendly people and stunning natural landscapes.
So all of these revised central ideas are much clearer, more specific, and more informative.
Exactly. And they give the audience a better understanding of what the speech will be about.
Absolutely. And one final piece of advice from the text is to not worry too much about perfecting your central idea until after you've developed the body of your speech.
Right. Sometimes it's easier to come up with the central idea once you've done your research and organized your main points.
Yeah, if you're struggling to formulate your central idea, it might be a sign that you need to go back and refine your thinking.
Exactly. The central idea should flow naturally from the content of your speech.
So let's wrap up our deep dive today by reviewing the key steps we've covered.
Sounds good.
We started by talking about choosing a topic, which can be anything from your personal experiences to your current curiosities to issues that you feel strongly about.
And we discussed some brainstorming techniques to help you generate ideas if you're feeling stuck.
Then we moved on to determining the general purpose of your speech, which is either to inform or to persuade.
And we talked about the importance of being clear about your goal from the outset.
Next, we focused on refining your general purpose into a specific purpose statement, which is a single infinitive phrase that states precisely what you hope to accomplish with your speech.
And we highlighted the importance of including the audience in your specific purpose statement.
Finally, we discussed the central idea, which is a one-sentence statement that encapsulates the main message of your speech.
And we looked at some examples of how to write a strong and effective central idea.
So mastering these initial steps is really the foundation for any successful speech.
It's about laying the groundwork so you can build a strong and compelling presentation.
And it can also help to reduce that feeling of overwhelm that can sometimes come with public speaking.
Absolutely. When you have a clear purpose and a well-defined message, you're much more likely to feel confident and prepared.
So as you go about your day today, I encourage you to think about a time when you had to give a presentation or a talk.
And consider how the principles we've discussed today might have helped you to be more effective.
Did you have a clear purpose in mind? Did you tailor your message to your audience? Did you have a strong central idea that guided your presentation?
These are all valuable questions to reflect on.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep refining your communication skills.
See you then.
Bye, man.